Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 46 of the virtual stone carving apprenticeship. Okay, we're getting close with the scale model, and I went and looked at the stone for the angel a couple days ago, and we're expecting it to be here within the month. I think there's about 2 weeks to do the saw work, and then we got to coordinate delivery. But I want to talk about the compasses a little bit before it gets here, so that I don't have to stop and try to explain during the process. There's some errors that you will likely encounter when you start pointing, and I want to talk about those. And because I'm going to be swinging the compasses first, I'm going to show you the typical errors or the concerns with using the compasses. I'm going to try to draw this so that it works for y'all. I don't know if this will show up. You can see that line? Probably not. Put a fatter line on there. Yeah, that should be better. Okay, and this is just kind of arbitrary because I've got to explain a couple of different things. Now, say we've got a foundation point right here and right here. And normally you're not going to have them like this, but this is to show you, this is like a proof, this is an example of how it works. And say the point that we want to shoot is right here. We'll make that's blue. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. I've got 3 compasses with markers taped to them. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this one up, and that one's right on the money already. Okay, so there's one. This one's marked. It's got 2 pieces of tape on it. We're going to set this up, and we're assuming that we've taken these measurements off the model and we've enlarged on the triangle, and this is what we're going to apply to the job. Now, what happens, the way this works, this is, someone has said this is like GPS triangulation, where you have 3 different radii and how they intersect. If I was a fancy computer person, I'd probably try to do an animation of like 3 bubbles, 3 spheres like soap bubbles that overlapped. But I cut stone and I draw pictures on paper. Okay, that's what I do. So I'm going to show you what happens if the foundation point, the 2 points obviously that from the foundation point to the point you're shooting is going to be, they're going to be captured within a plane, with an endless thing. But if both foundation points and the job point are caught within the same plane, this is what's going to happen. We'll swing this down, okay? And this is, we're just going to imagine that we're cutting stone away and cutting to get to this point. We're going to swing this caliper and go on here. We're going to swing it. Okay? Those touch just barely. But the problem is that for the gap between, you'll notice that the distance starts to narrow the closer you get, and then they're extremely close. And they're close for just in this case, they're close for about a 3/8 of an inch, not quite half an inch on each side of it. And when you're cutting stone, it's really hard to see whether they're moving together or moving apart from each other. And so when you're in plane like this is really dangerous, because what will happen is that you'll dig and you won't see any change in difference, and you'll hit that stone just enough that you'll remove this point where they actually kiss, and it'll be the same distance, and you'll see nothing changing, and then you'll start to see them migrate apart, because as you carve, you'll swing, take your measurement, and then use your judgment to see if you need to go deeper. Now, what happens if we take and move our points from being in plane with each other? Okay, this is when we've got two foundation points and your target point that are in plane with each other. Let's try doing it where they're not in plane with each other. Okay, this is our surface that we're working with. We've got our target point. Now let's just say we've got one that's right here, like before, but the other one, say it's down on the side of the stone, and let's just say it's down here. So these are in plane and these are in plane, but all three of them are not in plane with each other. So let's go ahead and set this up. See how close we are. Yeah, that one's right on the money. And then this one, we're probably going to have to adjust a little bit. And this is, we would have calculated this on our triangle, okay? So now let's swing our arcs to try to shoot this point. Okay, that right there is just like before. But watch this one. Because these are out of plane and they're divergent, see how fast those come together? This goes narrow, and it narrows up really quickly. It narrows right up, and then it hits. And so this eliminates the potential for, or diminishes the chance for error very significantly. But this also raises another concern. Some of the old videos you'll watch, if you do happen to find anyone that's pointing, especially some of the older videos or older content with the old men doing it the old-fashioned way, and you'll see them sort of linking two compasses together to a point to shoot that point, and they just use two compasses in order to mark that point on the job. Well, that's got some pitfalls as well, because if you look very carefully here, you'll see that these meet and cross, but then they also travel and they cross again. And so if you didn't put your compasses on here the right way, if you did that to get them to come together, if you happen to have a moment and you forget and you shoot here, that point that you want to be here could end up being over here. So that's the reason that I'll do a third point. And just say, for instance, usually we have a point above, a point below, like this may be down near her feet or wherever, and this may be up on top of her head, and then I'll have one that's down around on the side of the statue or the side of the stone. So we'd have a third point, let's just say it's over here. And this third point provides us some insurance. And these aren't in plane with each other in terms of this being in plane, all three of these points being in plane. This is divergent as well. So let's mark this, and then we can strike this one. Okay, now we've got a very strong reference that this point has been accurately shot because it won't reach over here. So we know we've got this third one. We've got two coming in, and then we've got another coming in from the side that's going to pull it one way or the other, and make sure that if we want this point, it's what we got, or if we wanted this point, that's what we've got. So, and like I said, once I start cutting this stone, I'm not going to be able to stop and do endless amounts of video to try to point out all the things that y'all need to be doing. I'm going to show you what I can, but this is slow work. And I can't slow it down by, many days to shoot endless amounts of video, trying to cover it on paper so you'll understand. All right, so that's the errors that you can run into with swinging the compasses. Okay? And this is why I use 3 compasses instead of just 2. You can use just 2, but you open yourself up for some issues, because the closer these points, if they're far away from each other, it's not a big deal. You know, if you're way off, you'll have a big swing where they'll be fine. But if these 2 points are relatively close, it's just like trying to read it when they're on the same, all in plane with each other, and it doesn't work well. This is a common issue with anything, whether you're pointing with a pointing machine or whether you're pointing with compasses. When you're shooting that point, we're going to set this up. This is the surface of the stone, okay? And say we want to go to this point. I hope you can see that. There's just a single point. The goal is we have to be careful. We have to understand what is around spatially in the model, because we can't just arbitrarily cut a big hole down across this and hog out a bunch of material, because if we do that in order to produce this point, we may find out that this was tangent to some detail. Say it was one of the common things is when you go in beside a figure's nose, and I just got a piece of scrap clay here, and say this point was right here next to her nostril. Now if we went in and went crazy like that and cut a great big hole, it would be like doing that, and then we can have our point right in the center. And obviously this is bigger, but we've eroded all this material that we've got to have. So you've got to make sure when you shoot a point that you are both aware of the material around it, because you may have to shoot this point very carefully and just to leave this material to have it. You also always want to shoot the point. When you cut a point, you want to be tangent to that surface and perpendicular to the tangent. You don't want to come in, just say for instance that this point over here that we were going to shoot, say it was on an outside curve, that the figure was actually like this. And we were coming down and we wanted to shoot this point on this curve. We can't come in straight down like this, like we did over here, where this is going to be on the surface of whatever the figure is. We can't come in and go down, because we could end up knocking this out and eroding this and cutting a big dent in the surface to get there. We have to come in perpendicular to this tangent, so we have to come in from this direction over here and leave this stone until we understand, because we're going to have to shoot this down in and be perpendicular there, so that we're working up here, we can shoot another one, and we can round this surface off. And those are the real pitfalls of using a pointing machine. Now obviously you have to set it up correctly, you have to use it correctly. Same thing with the compasses, you know, you have to use them correctly. I've got 3 compasses here, one that isn't marked, one that has 2 stripes of blue tape, and one that has 1 stripe of blue tape. Just for this exercise, you have to be able to keep them straight. Now, if these were left and right compasses, say this is one that was going to be vertical, either above or bottom. For the left and right, you can even take these dimensions once you've calculated them and reverse them. And what that will do is it'll reverse your job. Like I said, Andy cut a pair of twins and pointed one up from a scale model, and then he took all the dimensions off of it and reversed them and cut a mirror image statue. It's pretty cool. People talk about it. He did it right beside me. And so, you know, you can do it. You just got to keep your head where it's at. You can't be mixed up, because you have to keep all of these in order. as you're working with them, both your sets for your compasses for the job and your compass for the model. So just to recap, and I'll mention this again, but I wanted to bring this up in a separate video because I didn't want to take 15-20 minutes once I start trying to actually shoot points on this stone and have a video that was an hour and a half long. I wanted to get started on it and let you start thinking about this while I'm getting ready to start cutting this stone. It's critical that you set up your points so that they're your foundation points, and there'll be sometimes that it may happen that they do end up in plane and you just have to deal with it. And this, obviously this probably isn't the surface of the stone, this is where you're going to, but they're in plane. So you may have to do this, and you're going to have to just watch your marks really carefully. Now I'll show you how I mark my stone. You can chalk it up with hard plaster. You can we do it with soft plaster because it cleans off better, so you can keep going. But you have to watch your position of your foundation points in relation to your target point that you're trying to produce, and ideally you'll have points that aren't in plane, that aren't all in plane with the target point, the job point. Each one will be in plane with it, but two opposing points won't be in plane with that. And that way you can get a nice divergent approach, and they'll come in really fast and you'll really see your progress, and then all of a sudden it'll just stop and you're done. You'll know you can only go a little bit more and you're finished. And then this third point defines which intersection it is, because these three radii interact in a very unique way. So, but this is like I said, this is the fourth video on the compasses and triangles. This talks about errors and common pitfalls when you start pointing, and I just wanted to get this started and get it out so y'all can start thinking about it, because like I said, I can't shoot endless amounts. I will shoot a few points on this big stone, and then it's just going to be jumping ahead because it's going to be a long slog to point a life-size job. And everybody on YouTube wants a 30-second splurge. It ain't going to happen here. One thing I didn't explain yet. Now this is bear with me. I'm trying to represent something, like I said, three spheres that interact on a 2D surface. Okay, so this is not going to make sense just looking at it, but I'm going to explain what I'm trying to do. I'm going to manipulate the compasses as I'm pretending to shoot this point, to represent the fact that I haven't traveled far enough yet. Okay, so we've got a foundation point, we've got a foundation point, and we've got a foundation point. Okay, and these are at different places on the stone like before. Then we're trying to produce this point. Now, I'm just going to do this in 2 steps to try to keep it from being too confusing. We're going to set this up. That's where I'm going, okay, like before. Like before. And there's my other point. Okay? Now we're going to pretend that this is a big hump of stone, and so I can't reach it yet because the stone's interfering. So instead of it being where I can travel, I'm going to shorten this to make it look like we haven't quite got there yet. Okay? We're going to shorten each one of them just a little bit. Okay? And let's swing this to see how close we are to our point. Because imagine we're, okay? See, that one's off by about 1/8 of an inch. Let's see where this one is, because this one's more. Boy, that one's way off. Now let's look at this one, and let's see where we're at. okay, we're still not close. Okay, we got to keep digging. So we're going to have our triangle, our compasses be a little bit longer. And usually the closer these are to being at that level, you're going to have to use your judgment and look at your model, because if I'm way down on the side coming in like this, it's going to travel laterally really fast until the compass reaches a certain orientation. And you have to look at how it relates to the model to try to understand. Now, shooting this one, if I knew that this point and this point were really, really close to being flat in terms of how the model looked, then I don't want to go crazy with this one because it's real easy to go too deep. But if these both are far off, they're going to travel a lot faster. Okay? And so now let's swing again. See how much that moved? See how much that moved? Okay? And I know because I can watch how this travels. If I'm down on the side and it's traveling, see how fast that moves forward? Because if I'm like this, then I know it's not going to move much. If the compass is almost vertical, then I'm not going to go as fast. And this is something you're just going to have to learn. You have to trust me. Do what I tell you. Don't do what you think. You have to learn how these work, because all they're doing is following what you do. And as we get closer to being the way it needs to be, because what we'll do is we'll mark up the job with some plaster. I'll use dry plaster. That's what I use, because you can take your old plaster and scrub it in, then you got to scrub it out so you can keep carving and get rid of it. The dry plaster, you can pack a little bit in right there in your little hole once you start getting close, and do your swings to check your points. And once these are adjusted from the triangle, you never touch them. Okay, I only did this trying to figure out a way to show you an example. And we got a swing there. And our swing. And our swing. It makes a perfect intersection right there. But what's going to happen is you're going to have your little triangle where you got your three things that are going to come together until they all coincide, and define that unique relationship between these three radii. It's a little complicated to think about. You need to understand what it's supposed to do and how it happens, and not question it. Because the more you sit there and try to think you're smarter than these plain little old compasses and these radii, the more it'll kick your butt. So realize how you're cutting and how your compass is advancing. Because if it's going like this, then you're traveling you're moving a lot of real estate at a time. If you cut and it's pretty close to vertical, it's not going to change a whole lot as you cut it. So you got to be really careful once you start getting close to vertical, because once you go past a certain point, you're too deep and you can't fix it. So don't go that far. All right. I hope this wraps it up for this portion of the instruction. We're going to get back into working on the other stuff and try to wrap this video up. But I wanted to give you something to think about beforehand, to be able to understand where we're going, because this is complicated and you can screw it up and ruin stones. And when you've got a expensive piece of stone that's taken you many weeks or months or even a year to get, and you ruin it, it's ruined. So trust your training, trust what you're learning, learn it properly. Don't listen to all those other people that don't know or they're making it up or whatever. This is old stuff. It's been used for centuries. It works. It works for people that can't read or write because they're trained how to do it, and they follow the principles and they follow the instructions and they don't question it, and they can relax and work accurately. And it's amazing how powerful this is. It's just really cool, and there's nothing like swinging the compasses. It's just a really cool place to be. So my name's Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio, teaching you about compasses and triangles with the virtual stone carving apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.